Thank you. Hello, everyone. Hopefully my Zoom will not cut out completely randomly and for no apparent reason. What I would like to do today is to use one prayer, the prayer Sim Shalom. The reason I am choosing this for today's session is because it has a lot of really important and common vocabulary, words that you'll encounter in other prayers and that are just good to know. You just see them over and over again. And Sim Shalom as part of the Amidah just appears. You'll see it, whether it's the high holidays or Shabbat services. You will see this a lot. So I want to use Sim Shalom, and we're going to look today at nouns and how Hebrew nouns work, and at prepositions and how Hebrew prepositions work. And then next week for our final session, then we will look specifically at the Ashamnu, so the Vidui, Ashamnu, and we'll look at the Hebrew of that. And we'll also look at Kol Nidre for Erev Yom Kippur. Okay. Links from the supplements. Yes. So let me just say a quick word. I know that folks are still coming in. There were some issues last week connecting to a kind of course that I've put together that has copies of the PDFs of the PowerPoints and recordings. So if you want to learn how to read the prayers aloud and some vocabulary lists, we are going to figure out how to get a link to you. But meanwhile, feel free to send me an email. So if you Google Tamar Kamionkowski, there are not many of us. In fact, I think I'm a one of a kind. And you should be able to find a way to get in touch with me. All right, so let's jump into today's material. Share screen. All right, so Hebrew for the high holidays. We're going to start by just looking at the prayer, and then we will break things down. So, no, here we go. All right, so the prayer itself, Sim Shalom, what I'm giving you here is the same text in two different Hebrew fonts. So something that beginners to Hebrew often struggle with is the fact that there are slightly different fonts in Hebrew. The one on the bottom is closer to what you will tend to find in most Sidurim, in most prayer books, and in the mahzor, the high holiday prayer books. But the one on top is also quite common. So again, if we can get you connected, you can look at this material and download it and kind of compare the letters for yourself. All right, so let's get to the material. Sim Shalom, Tova uveracha, chen v'chesed v'rachamim, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael amecha. So today we are going to focus on the components here that are nouns. And we're going to start with a little basic grammar lesson. In Hebrew, every single noun has either a grammatically feminine association or grammatically masculine. So English, if I say the word stone, then the stone is something. It's not the stone is she or the stone is he. But in Hebrew, very binary system, and every single noun is assigned a grammatical gender. So, for example, words like woman, wife, girl, these are obviously feminine, right? So we'll see in a moment that the word for woman is isha, and isha is a feminine noun. And then also with the masculine, there are some nouns that is pretty obvious why these words are assigned what they're assigned. But most words don't have any kind of obvious relationship to a particular gender. So you can see that stone, which is even, and hand, the Hebrew word is yad, they are grammatically feminine, while word like voice, kol, or name, shem, are grammatically masculine. So why do we care? Why does this matter? Now, I want to say just a couple of things about this. First of all, when we say that nouns are grammatically masculine or feminine, it does not mean that any kind of that this should lead us to interpreting that they thought that a hand was more feminine than masculine, right? Or that a voice was more masculine than feminine. These are really grammatical assignments. And the reason in Hebrew that you need to know whether a noun is feminine or masculine is so that you know what verbs and adjectives go with it. So if I say, for example, she brought, and then I say he brought, and they brought, in each of those cases, the word brought is not changing. But in Hebrew, if it is a she brought, then that verb is going to look feminine. And if it's he brought, then that brought will have a masculine form. And if it's they brought, then it will have the word equivalent for brought will have a plural marker. So it's about kind of matching things up with things. All right. One way of determining whether a word, a noun, is masculine or feminine is actually by looking for the feminine. So the vast, vast majority of Hebrew words, nouns, that have a hey at the very end are likely to be feminine. So isha, woman, the hey at the end is an indicator. Mishpacha means a family. And the Hebrew word for family is grammatically feminine, thus the hey at the end. One other marker, which is less common but still useful, is words that have a taf at the end, the taf being the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. So a word like malchut, the taf at the end, or a word like emet, the taf at the end, indicate that these are grammatically feminine. There are a handful, maybe two handfuls of common nouns that do not have a hey or a taf and are still considered feminine. And I can try to figure out how to get you a list that I have compiled of those. All right, so let's start to look at this in action. What we have here, the highlighted words, these are all nouns. There are a few additional nouns that I have not highlighted, either because they're repeats or because they are really not that common. So I want to take a few minutes to go through these, to notice how they are grammatical nouns, and also to talk about the meaning of these words. And I would say that this is key vocabulary. So let's break it down a little bit. All right. So if we look at the first line of this Sim Shalom, and there are a lot of different nigunim, a lot of different tunes. A very common one is Sim Shalom, Tova Uvracha, etc., etc. So our first word here is Shalom, meaning peace. Now, since there's no hey or a taf at the end, I know that shalom is likely to be a masculine noun. So shalom meaning peace. And the first word here, sim, is an address to God, where we are saying to God, sim, give, place. So it's a list of all the things that we want God to give us. So sim, give, shalom, peace. The next word, uveracha. So we're going to focus right here on just the word beracha, a beracha, a blessing. And the Hebrew word beracha is feminine. We see the hey at the end. Our next word, chen, and I want to treat this with the following, va chesed. We'll talk about the va in a few minutes. So the main word here is chesed and chen. So I want to just say a little bit about these two words, chen va chesed. And I'm going to stop share for just a moment so I can see some faces out there. Chen and chesed are words that are really, really difficult to translate into English. There really is no English kind of counterpart that captures the range of meaning of chen v'chesed. Chen is often translated as grace. That is that aspect of God where God bestows gifts on us, whether or not we necessarily deserve it. Okay. And then there is chesed. Chesed is often translated in prayer books as loving kindness. So when you see words like loving kindness, we are probably dealing with representing chesed. So in the Bible, in Tanakh, chen and chesed have really very, very specific meanings. So chesed is what God provides the people of Israel, while the people of Israel remain loyal to God. So in this covenantal relationship, part of the arrangement is that the people of Israel need to worship only the God of Israel, Yud He Vav He. That's the first thing that God wants. The second thing that God wants, according to the biblical texts, is for us to follow a series of laws. That's, right, speaking we biblical times, then what God brings into the partnership is chesed. So chesed is an element of the ancient covenant. And chesed includes the things that only God can provide, a level of protection and attention and even intimacy with the people of Israel. So in the Bible, chesed has a very, very specific meaning. It is what God gives us. By the time we get to the Sidurim, the prayer books, and the prayers and the mahzor for the high holidays, the terms have loosened up a little bit more. And chesed is less explicitly associated with covenant, and it's one of the gifts that God gives us. So chen is usually the kind of gift that does not require us to do anything in response, while chesed is the kind of gift and attention that God gives if we stay loyal and keep the commandments. So that's about a kind of relationship of reciprocity. Okay. So, and loving kindness, I'd say, is just as good as any other kind of word to try to capture what chesed is. But often with my students, I say, you know what? Just say chesed. If there's no English counterpart, just keep chesed, don't translate it, and think of chesed as God's care for us. All right. And then the last word on this line, again, we're going to ignore the vi, rachamim. Rachamim is usually translated as compassion. And one fun thing about the word rachamim is that it comes from the root, the Hebrew word rechem. So the resh and the chet and the mem are the base of the word here. The im is just a plural marker. And rechem means womb. So some people have suggested that rachamim, this kind of compassion, was originally more closely associated with feminine kind of attributes. And then from that, you can go in a lot of different directions. All right, so one more time, shalom is peace, beracha, blessings, and it's feminine, chen, grace without the Christian connotations, chesed, the word that I say, loving kindness, but so much more. And then rachamim, compassion, with some womb energy in there. All right. Now I want to look at a cluster of nouns at the bottom. So the first one we have here is Torat Chayim. And if you see the taf here, it tells us that Torah is a feminine. When the word Torah is by itself, it just has your basic hey at the end, Torah. But as soon as you take a feminine word and attach it to the next word, so that we have Torat Chaim, meaning Torah of life, when you put those two things together, so the something of something, like B'nai Yisrael, the children of Israel, then those hays shift over to taf. So Torah, as soon as you attach it to another word, becomes Torat Chaim. And this is just a beautiful, beautiful image that one of the things that we crave from God is Torah of life, right? Torah that sustains. All right, our next cluster is Ahavat Chesed. So again, notice the taf here means it's a feminine, and that if it's not attached to another word, if it was just appearing by itself, it would have a hey at the end, and it would be ahava. And ahava is love. So ahavat chesed is the love of God's chesed. And then we have tzedakah. And some of you may be familiar with the word tzedakah, which in contemporary Judaism, and for most of Judaism, tzedakah has been seen as most narrowly charity, but offering different kinds of supports for people. But in Torah itself, it does not mean that. In Torah, tzedakah means justice or righteousness. All right. That's why a person, a great righteous one, is called a tzaddik. A tzaddik, it's the same root here. So tzedakah, justice, righteousness, and again, a hey at the end. So it is feminine. And then we've seen these before. Chaim is life, and shalom is peace. So let me see if I want to jump to the next slide yet. No, not yet. All right. So I just want to review here. Sim, give, right? This is calling out to God, give. And what is it that we seek? We seek shalom, peace. We seek tova, goodness. We seek bracha, blessing. We seek chen and chesed and rachamim, right? God's gifts to us about protection and attention and rachamim and compassion. And we want that. Aleinu is basically upon us, right? So place all of these things upon us, ve'al kol Yisrael, and upon all of Israel. Amecha is am, your people, of Israel, your people. Right. So what is it that we as a collective desire? It's peace, it's goodness, it's blessing, it's protection, it's compassion, right? And this is what we are seeking. Notice in this particular context, there's nothing about like wisdom, right? This prayer, Sim Shalom, is really about the qualities that allow us to live and feeling safe, right? And feeling supported. I think we could all use more of that in our lives. So I'll just go through a quick translation of this middle part then. Barchenu is from barach, which is the same shoresh, it's the same basic root as beracha. So the noun beracha, a blessing, here we have a verbal form. So bless us, Avinu, our Father. And a lot of people are adding imenu to this, right? Our mother. Kulanu ke'echad, all of us as one, right? So bless us, all of us together as a collective, as one. This is not just, for me, give this to me. Every time we're reciting this blessing, we're really invoking this goodness upon everyone together. And then finally, be'or panecha literally means with the light of your face. So there's this metaphor of God showing God's face and God hiding God's face. And it's not to be taken literally. God never reveals God's face, but access to God's face means that God is paying attention, is in relationship with us. All right. And then ki, because, be'or panecha, because in the light of your face, natata lanu, you have given us, oh, Adonai, we talked about this last week. It's an abbreviation of the divine name, Adonai Eloheinu, our God. What have you given us? Well, here's what we have already received. We have received Torat Chaim. We have received the teaching, the Torah of life. And we have already received the Ahavat Chesed and the love of your Chesed. Utzedakah, we have already received justice, righteousness, And then again, words that are repeated, uveraha, we already have blessings. Berachamim, we already, right? You have already given us compassion. V'chaim, and life in general. V'shalom, and peace. And then finally, v'tov be'enecha, it is good in your eyes, livarech, to bless, et amcha Yisrael, your people Israel. Bechol eitz, at every moment, right, every time, uvechol sha'ah, and in every hour, bishlomecha, through your peace, right, through your peace. And sha'ah is a noun, and hopefully now you can tell whether the noun is a feminine or a masculine noun. Sha'ah means an hour, right, designation of time, and it is a feminine. All right, I think before I go on to prepositions, I'm going to stop share for a second and see if we are. So, all right. Chen, chesed, and rachamim are masculine. Yes, they are all masculine. And one of the fun things about having grammatical gender assignment to words is that it allows you to play a little bit. So the word rechem, which means womb, is grammatically masculine. And so you have these interesting twists. So one example that we find in the book of Isaiah and in some of the Psalms is when the people of Israel are calling on God to slay an enemy, to remove some kind of a threat. And sometimes in the text, rather than saying, "Oh God, do this," the text will say something like, "Oh, arm of God, defeat the enemy. Oh, arm of God," because the arm was seen as a body part of strength. Vanquish our foes, bring us peace, all of this. Well, the word zeroa, arm, is grammatically feminine. So when you read through that text in Hebrew, all of the verbs that we're using to call on God are actually in the feminine. And so it allows us, ironically, to sometimes move beyond the gender binary and to become a little more creative by thinking about, what does it mean when you're reading something that's grammatically feminine over and over again, and you know that you're talking to God, but using a feminine, right? How does that impact on us? So that is, that's one of the reasons that paying attention to the gender may be useful. So Elizabeth is asking, are forms of speech like verbs that end with the hey feminine as well? So I would say, yes, kind of. So a hey at the end of any word, even with prepositions, with verbs, with nouns, usually indicates something feminine. It just may do it in slightly different ways. And I can actually show you that in a moment when we look at some prepositions. All right, what's the Hebrew word or term for grammatical nouns or for regular nouns and proper nouns? A noun is a pe'ula. I'm not sure that they use the word grammatical. I think they would just say a noun is feminine or masculine. And the reason that I just keep saying grammatically is to avoid the misconception that because a stone is grammatically feminine, that it means that there's something like feminine about a stone. So I'm just kind of putting that out there. All right. Shem Etzem. Yes, thank you, Rosalind. Yes. All right. Right. So Shem Etzem for the noun. No, but not necessarily the grammatical piece. All right. Let me add a little bit more. So back to the screen. All right. So I want to introduce you to a few prepositions. The first three especially, ki, bi, and li, are really prefixes that you attach to a noun. So they're not self-standing words. So you would take ki, and if I want to say something like a stone, and I have even, stone, I would say ki even. If I wanted to say, let's use shalom. So if I have the word peace, shalom, and I want to say in peace, I would say bi shalom. If I wanted to say for peace, I would say li shalom. So instead of having completely independent words as we have in English, these three prepositions are attached to nouns. Another common preposition is the word min, from. And min can come by itself, or the mem can attach to a noun. So if I want to say, like, from peace, I could say mi shalom. So let's see how this plays out. Examples, li milchama. So I have milchama, battle or war, which is a feminine noun. Right? So war and is feminine noun. And I can add li, and now it makes it to a battle. Or if I have Sarah, and I want to say that someone is like Sarah, I would say ki Sarah, attaching it right onto the noun. And then finally, if I have the word Shem, name, and I want to say in a name, bi Shem. So you can take any of these and attach them to any noun to give you a little more information about what that noun is doing in the sentence. And someone was asking before about hey at the end. We can actually, I have this in lessons online. If you're interested, I can give you links for those things. But I can take something like the lamed, and by adding different suffixes, I can say to or for me, to or for us, to or for them. So for example, you may see from time to time the word lanu, asher or banu, asher bachar banu. Banu is the bet plus nu, which means we. So in us, lanu, for us. So the hey at the end would mean for her, bah, with a hey, for her. So in that regard, a hey on a preposition is taking us to a feminine. All right, one final new piece, and then we'll come back to sim shalom. The consonant vav, v, means and. It's a conjunction. Most of the time, it'll just appear as vi and attached to a noun. There are a few letters of the Hebrew alphabet that require a little bit of a modification of how we pronounce that first and element. So I like to call the bump letters bet, mem, and pay, b, m, and p, are easier to pronounce if you start the word instead of saying vi bat to say u bat. And then the final example has to do with words that begin with a guttural letter, and those often need a little bit of an adjustment to the vowel sounds with the vav to make it a little easier to pronounce the word. Again, if you're interested in these kinds of things, I can direct you to different places where I go into a lot more detail. I can talk about prepositions for an hour. Okay. Oh, here we go. All right. So now coming back to our Sim Shalom, we can look at some of those nouns and a few other examples to see how things are attached to the beginning. So now we can come back to the word for blessing, beracha, a blessing. And we now understand the u in front of beracha means and blessing. So chen va chesed, right? Chen and chesed and rachamim. Right. So whenever you see a vav on a noun, you can think this is my conjunctive, and we have here u tzedakah, u beracha, ve chayim, ve shalom, right, and on and on. And then we also have a few examples of prepositions. So echad, the last word on the second line, echad means one. Ki echad means as one, right? Bless us, ki echad, as one, right? Or like one being. The word or is light. You might know this from the very beginning of the book of Genesis. The very first thing that God says in Torah is Yehi or, let there be light. So here we're attaching to the word or the preposition be means in light, right? And li varech, second to last line, li helps us to understand this verb as to bless, the infinitive, li varech, to bless. And one more here, bechol, kol means all or every, so in every time, right, for all time. So one of the things about breaking down Hebrew when you encounter it in texts is just keeping in mind that a lot of forms are created by adding things, prefixes and adding suffixes to a basic word. We don't do that in English. We just keep adding words onto our sentences. But in Hebrew, you can convey a lot by using prefixes and suffixes. And so, for example, the very last word here, bishlomecha, is a combination of the noun shalom, peace, with the preposition bet, so in peace or with peace. And then this cha at the very end means you, masculine. So all of this together, bishlomecha, is conveying what takes us a few words. In your peace, right? Or through, by your peace. So one of the things, for those of you who are relatively new to translating Hebrew, a lot of the work of kind of learning the grammar is all about determining on every word what are my 3 root letters. So, for example, on Barchenu, the trick is to learn to distinguish anything that might be a suffix or a prefix, so that you end up with these 3 letters, Bet, Resh, Chaf, Barach, that has to do with blessing. And so here on Uveracha, by adding a hey to the 3 root letters, we have now just made this a noun, a blessing. And by adding the vav at the beginning, we're now saying, and a blessing. Versus Barchenu, where we know we're still dealing with the realm of blessing, right? The general idea, but here it's a verb, and you just learn because of the vowel patterns, plus nu, a suffix nu that means bless us. Right? Avinu is av plus nu, our Father. So again, I encourage you, as you're considering next steps for Hebrew, to really think about a language that is based on 3 root letters. And then you can make verbs and nouns and adjectives by adding prefixes, by adding suffixes, right? Attaching things to the root, messing around a little bit with the vowels and changing the vowels. And that way, there's actually a lot less vocabulary to learn, because all you need to do is learn what that basic root means. And then you can see it play out as a noun or as a verb or as an adjective. All right, so I'm going to stop share and leave a little time for additional questions. Okay. All right. Yes, war is feminine. Yeah. It's something to work with. The letters, in addition to the bet that go to u, are the bet, the mem, and the pay. That's why I call them the bump letters, B-U-M-P. I'll put in the chat the letter bet, the letter mem, and the letter pay. And it's simply because over time, your mouth just starts to shift. There are a lot of things that often, like when learning modern Hebrew, you learn, oh, these are exceptions to the rules, or this and this is irregular. There are actually very, very few irregularities in Hebrew. Most of the time, what we see or are told is irregular is actually just about an adjustment that people have made over time because something is just easier to say that way. One example is we have the letter bet and vet. We have the letter pay and fe, kaf and chaf. Those aren't 2 different letters. Sometimes we'll say b, and sometimes we'll say the. And it's all about the sounds that we're making in our mouth. So if I want to say the word house, bayit, okay, the Hebrew word for house is bayit. Notice that the B sound, in the privacy of your own homes, try paying attention to what your jaw and your tongue and what's happening in your mouth. B explodes. You can't say B for a long period of time. You can go B, but what we're actually extending is E, not B. That just pops out. The is using all the same parts of your mouth and the same configuration of teeth and your tongue and all of that. The is the same thing. It just allows the air to go through. So with words that have a vowel and you're going into a bet right after a vowel sound, if you try to say oob, 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 say that, a whole lot of times really fast, and you'll be saying oov, because it's just easier to go from ooh, an extending vowel sound, to ooh, an extending consonant sound. So these things aren't irregular. They're really just about what happens in the mouth. So someone asked about a good source for the fundamental roots. If you go to Kamionkowski Beit Midrash, to my general website, I have a free downloadable kind of introduction to prayer book Hebrew that gives you like the 30 most common nouns, something like the 30 most common verbs, gives you the numbers 1 to 10, and kind of lays out some of the things that we're covering here more systematically. And you're just kind of welcome to use that resource. And then I will take Rosalind's question here. How can we tell if a prayer is in Aramaic? So we'll be looking at this next week. One of the ways to tell if something is in Aramaic instead of Hebrew is if there are a lot of aleph at the end. So in Hebrew, when we use ha to say the, so again, coming back to bayit, a house, to say the house, I say ha bayit. In Aramaic, to say the something, instead of putting a hey in front of the word, you put an aleph at the end of the word. So, like if you look at the Kaddish Yatom, like the mourner's prayer, you'll see there are a whole lot of words there with aleph at the end. All right. I am going to put into this chat the name of my site. I don't have links handy, and I don't want to take the time right now to start kind of looking this up. But if you can see there, Kamionkowski Beit Midrash, if you Google that, this will come up. Again, there are a handful of Kamionkowskis in the world. If you find physics, it's my brother. If you, thank you for my Jewish learning for providing that. Yeah, so you can go there and I think something pops out at you saying, do you want this free guide? And then you can have it. There are also on the website, there are also recommendations on what grammar books to learn depending on your learning style. So I kind of say, here are some different kind of introduction to biblical Hebrew books. This one has this strength, this one has this strength, right? Depending on how you learn. So we have a number of resources there for you. Any other questions for today? Okay. So hopefully this is giving you like an orientation to help you just begin to recognize things. And next week, when we look at Ashamnu, we're going to focus there on verbs, because it's all I did this and I did this and I did this and we've done this and we've done this. So it's great to look at how verbs work, because it's just a list of things that we have done. We've done. So we'll see the verbs there. And I think that's it for today.